thanks for checking out my first devlog for Aerlum. So this is a competitive FPS in development that's trying to bring something new and fresh to the genre in a lot of ways. The gameplay is shaping up to be pretty fun, in my opinion, and I also have some ideas about creating a better social experience than we typically have in these kinds of games, but you can read more on that and other game philosophy stuff on the website. At the time of making this video, I've been working on the game for about 6 months part-time. I mainly worked on the gun mechanics because that's the core of the game, but also some networking. Everything I'm showing actually works in multiplayer already, but I'll be showing more on that side of things when I have more back-end systems and interfaces in place. The audio and visuals are in the early stages. Pretty much everything is placeholder at this point, but that's what I'll be working on next, and I'll have more of that to show in the next devlog. In this one, I'm just going to be talking about the gun mechanics and the gameplay. So, Aerlum is a futuristic sport where competitors each have the same customizable gun, and all gameplay is tied to this gun. Special forms of movement, attacks, defensive abilities, utility, and because this mechanic is such an important element, I wanted to develop that to a certain point before doing too much with anything else. And now that I have, it's turned into something I didn't quite expect, but for the better, I think. The gun started off being more traditional. It had a lot of customization, but didn't really offer gameplay that was unique. It still felt like any other shooter, and that's not really what I wanted. So I leaned into some of the more fun ideas and mechanics I had, and now it's more of a power customizer, I guess. So you can craft these very dynamic abilities and have a surprising amount of creative freedom with it. The idea is that you don't pick a hero or class, but the gun has enough options that players can essentially make their own. It would take a really long time to go into detail with everything you can do, but I want to at least do a quick overview of what it looks like to actually create an ability. I can do a more in-depth video if people are interested, just let me know. So in the bottom left, you have your preset HUD. There's a damage and energy cost per shot, which will be based on the overall preset's value and skill requirement. Right now, the numbers don't actually mean anything because it's impossible to know how valuable something truly is at this point, but just know that these will be adjusted over time as we figure that out. At the bottom, these are all the mods you can choose from currently, and many of them actually have multiple options, so these are more like categories. When you want to create an ability, you just adjust the settings how you want, and it gets saved as that preset. And then you can switch to it anytime by pressing a keybind. So right now I have keybinds for 5 presets, but you can have up to 10. But let's just get into it. I will show you a few examples of cool things you can do. So let's say we want to make a boomerang type of ability. This is one that is pretty fun, in my opinion. So what are the things you need for that? You want it to be longer than a sphere, because by default it's a sphere, so you want to expand it. So I'll click expand. You want it to have some mass, and I already do have a little bit of mass on this one, so that's fine. I'm going to bring down the velocity a little bit to make it easier to control. You want it to come back to the player, and so the transport mod gives you some options for controlling the movement of both the player and the projectile in relation to each other. So in this case, if I set it to 2-player, when I use the trigger mod to activate it, it will come back to me. And guide lets me influence the path of the projectile with my aim. So let's see what this looks like without that. Just by default, I can shoot it, and as you can see, it is influenced by gravity a little bit. It slightly drops. And by default, it flies straight. But if I have guide on, I can actually just aim away from the target and flick to it. So as you can see, I'm influencing the movement of it. So that's one thing you can do. And you can also, since it's a boomerang, you can actually intentionally shoot past the target and then hit the target from behind. So let's see if I can actually do this. Yeah, so basically I'm intentionally going past, I'm pressing right click to trigger the 2-player mod, and then I'm bringing it back to me. Yeah, so that's a boomerang. Another cool thing you can do is create a grenade. Let's just do sort of a basic grenade. So what that needs probably a little bit more mass. It needs some bounce. Let's make a giant one. Let's crank up the radius. It needs to have radiate, which is basically explosion. It does AoE damage when it gets triggered. We can have it push the player if we want. Let's see what this looks like. It's kind of fast. Let me make it a little bit slower. Yeah, that's basically a grenade. And you can just adjust that how you want. One other thing that you can do that's pretty cool. So I really like beam type weapons, but because this system relies so heavily on projectiles, I wasn't sure if that was going to work, but I think I have a way that will work. And so what I'm doing is I'm using this phase mod, and basically this just removes collision. It won't collide with the level or players, but it will do damage over time when it's overlapping something. So basically, you can have a low velocity, you can have tether, which basically attaches it to the front of the gun. You can have stasis, which means you can stop it from moving while it's attached. And I think that's pretty much all I need. The other stuff is irrelevant. So let me see what this looks like. Oh, I also want expand on the Z-axis, because that will make it longer, basically in line with the gun. More like a sword, an energy sword. So if I overlap the player with it, right now it does a broken amount of damage, but you get the idea. Yeah, so you have a lot of flexibility in what you can do. Right now, I'm mostly looking for first impressions and general feedback, like, does this kind of game seem fun? I'm also interested to hear any mod ideas you might have. If you want to follow along with development, obviously you can subscribe to this channel or follow a social account. I'm just now posting on and sharing these accounts for the first time, by the way, so starting at 0 on everything. If you want to be a tester or have more in-depth discussion on the game, you should definitely join the Discord. And that's all I have for now. I look forward to getting some feedback, and I will see you in the next update.